Hello, my honey. Hello, my baby. Testing in the chat. All right, we're doing a test stream here. If you're watching this on the YouTube replay, just doing a little bit of a test while we letter some pages, see how it looks. I can already tell it does not look great. But that's okay. We'll get the settings down, but that's part of what this is about. So hello to anyone who's tuning in. We're going to be lettering some Drumsticks of Doom today. Just recently funded on Kickstarter. Yay, congratulations, yay. But now it's time to finish the work. You got to finish what you do. So I am going to be finishing that lettering. Well, not finishing it, but trying to finish it today. So just thought I would kind of see how a stream like this would go. So here we are. We got our crusty old version of Photoshop. Don't make fun of me. I know in the lettering world I'm a little bit behind, but the Photoshop has not let me down yet. Still works great. Still doesn't cost me anything to renew every year. So still going with that. But yeah, so I got my Photoshop open. I can show you kind of where I set up some, if I can figure out how to get this to share. Why is this not working? Oh, there we go. All right, so we're going to post to the social medias. We should probably do like a little welcome screen here in future. My current bit rates are lower than recommended, so let's see how we can fix that. Open that widget, open that widget. All right, we're just doing some testing, so sorry for the slow start. Yeah, we'll have to figure that out. It says I'm streaming lower than the rate, so it is probably blurry. But again, this is just kind of a test. We'll see how it goes over the first couple of minutes. But the first thing I like to do, we're already lagging too, so we've got some updates to do. I have like a word balloon template that I use. A lot of people set up, again, those who use Illustrator, you can set up your artboard where you have kind of all these, you have all your balloons and tails and sound effects and things like that. So you see some of the Drumsticks of Doom ones already here that you've probably already seen. But yeah, no sense in creating new ones. You know, if you're gonna use a sound effect in a series, or I've started to kind of create those, but mostly, I reuse the balloons because I don't want stiff, stale balloons. I don't want uniform balloons. Look okay, but in most comics, you want them to look a little more organic, even though you're using digital. So I try to do that. I got a tip from the amazing guru of lettering, Nate Picos. He does very similar, and he always recommends, at least you probably can't really tell if you've seen any of the comics that I've lettered. You could tell better, but you'll see when we start lettering it. Again, they're just, I've rounded the edges. I have some that I really like. And again, I've got a variety here of different sizes, so I can go a little more quickly, more rounded edges for, more square dialogue, when it's not, the middle lines aren't as wide. So I've got a couple different varieties. I got a few with tails, and then I've got a few tails that I like to use. But I do end up doing those kind of custom, as I'll show you here, more often than not, because they just don't always line up with where the character is on the page, so it's just easier. But I have a couple that I kind of saved over the years, but don't use them too often. Then I have a couple sound effects, like I use this one for when people are speaking, like a walkie-talkie, or it's coming out of the radio or something like that. I've used that one before. But yeah, that's kind of my basic setup. I obviously could expand this a lot more. Again, more seasoned letterers have, long lists of word balloon types and effects and all kinds of things that they use. So let's open up some files. Most of this, again, this is really just a test, so a lot of this will be boring, kind of copy and pasting. Excuse me, but if you are in the chat, chime in, tell me what you think. I always bring up a previously lettered page. You know, again, like I mentioned Nate or Blambot, Blambot on Twitter. He's an amazing resource. He has an amazing book on digital lettering, The Essential Guide to Comic Book Lettering. I highly recommend that people pick it up. It is amazing. But in Illustrator, you know, you lay out the board in the middle and then you would bring the page in, save it. So again, I do it a little bit more clunky. I kind of bring in 3 or 4 pages here, and hopefully they're, oh, some of these I've already pasted the words on, so that's good. I was a little bit ahead of myself, so you get some spoilers to the series coming up. But I always bring in a previously lettered page just so I make sure that I'm at the right size for font and everything like that. Really, again, in Photoshop, if you kind of just click on the last balloon, it'll kind of copy it for you. Just a little tip for you. So then if you're going to the next page, you know that you're using the same font. As long as you're in the same resolution, that is one thing about Photoshop that you should be aware of. Resolution matters for the size. The size is going to change. So if your artist accidentally gives you a 300 DPI and then gives you a 600, that is going to mess with your sizes. So be careful. Prepare your pages in advance. If you are working with people, if you're doing this for hire, I've rarely worked for hire, but I would kind of get an idea of what their competency is in art. If they understand those kind of terminologies first, because if they start sending you files in the wrong resolution, the wrong size, the wrong type that you need, excuse me, it's going to be a lot of extra work for you. So just make sure that you're clear about that in advance. So yeah, so we got a nice page here with Domenico and Lana, a little bit of a spoiler there. If you haven't, we just finished the Kickstarter for Drumsticks of Doom, so you can pick that up on our website very soon in our web store. So again, what I'm going to do is I kind of have my favorite row here, and I'm just going to highlight them because I know this is the layer that I'm on. And then I'm going to use, you know, this tool to, you know, the dancing dots here to highlight the pixels that I want, and then I'm going to switch to this and just drag it right over to the page that I want. And that's right here. And then I have a couple word balloons to move around. I might do this a couple times. I might, again, you know, if I see a balloon as I'm working on the page and I'm like, oh, I really like this one, or this shape will work great for that, I'll just grab one at a time. Again, it saves you a few seconds here and there, which can be very helpful. Your lettering balloon is always going to be, your balloons are always going to be under your lettering, obviously, because if you didn't, you'd cover them up. I have my stroke setting, ha ha ha, jokes. I have it set, always set to inside because that's going to make the balloon tail sharper. I always set it to black. There could be times where you don't. You know, maybe we'll go over that in the future. Always set to. Oh, I'm sorry. For this series, I set it to 10. I try to. An old habit that longtime collaborator Bob Ornelas and some other great illustrators taught me is try it. It should. Your word balloon stroke should be about what the panel borders are at. It's not always exact, but I try to work within that frame. You can just hit Control Plus there to kind of zoom in. And this looks okay. Hopefully, if anybody's in the chat, you know, give me some feedback. If you're on YouTube afterwards, if this uploads to YouTube, if you're watching it there, let us know what you think of the quality. But yeah, I can zoom in there. And yeah, so you see the stroke. It's about what Dan's page borders are, a little bit thinner. I also, it depends the style of the book. Sometimes I'll go a little thicker for more cartoony, you know, a little thinner for other things. I've done in colored books with colored pages. I have done no stroke to the balloons. It's all just a white panel, a solid white balloon. So you can do different things with that, but again, typically I try to stay around what the panel borders are at. You know, this could have probably been maybe a 12, but you know, maybe seemed a little too thick when I did that. We can even kind of just, you know, while you're watching, hopefully just double click on that. Like if we did a 12, you can see how much thicker it is. And if we did a 14, you know, now we're getting pretty thick. And then the other part of that is, you know, you have to be mindful of your font size. You know, I'm at a 6 here. Most fonts you're going to be probably at a 6 or a 7 in most standard American-sized comics, but that's going to factor into it too. You know, if you do a really thick word balloon stroke, you're going to have a little bit less room for your letters in there. So most balloons you're going to set up in kind of this oval shape. Once in a while, again, if it's a shorter sentence, I'll put usually it's one sentence per balloon, but if it's a shorter sentence like this, I'll keep them together. I might change that as the page gets laid out, but I'm going to go back to my layer here. And then I'm just going to hit Control T, and I'm going to manipulate that balloon. Get used to your Photoshop. I actually have an older version of Photoshop, so some of the shortcuts are not the same as the newer ones, so I apologize if I throw anybody off, but Control T is usually to transform the thing that you have highlighted. So you saw that I clicked on, and I'm going to apply it. And then while I'm still clicked on the cursor here, I can move it if I need to. I try to get it as centered as possible to where I want it to be around the balloons. You do the best that you can not to leave so much gutter space in here, if you can see where my cursor is. Maybe I can even zoom in a little bit more. I try to not to leave too much here, so it has a nice uniform shape. But again, if I was using a straight balloon like this, you could see, because I've kind of rounded the edges previously on that balloon, that's one that I use. That one at the top I use very often because it's it's unique enough, but it's not awkwardly shaped. There's not like one side that's really big, which you can do. I tend to like mine to look a little bit smoother. I've used this this template on dozens and dozens of books and shorts so far, so you may even start to recognize some of my patterns there. But you see what I did with the rounded elliptical, there would have been way less gutter space here. It would have looked really tight around the edges. Some people might think, oh, I don't want this line out, so I might move it like that. Actually, I do like how that looks, so I'm probably going to keep that. So yeah, you can play around with it. I letter most of my own stuff, so I can kind of afford the time, I guess is a good way to say it. You may not want to spend, you might have yours kind of set up. I'm looking at dialogue too, because these this is a book that I wrote, so I want the dialogue to be the best it can be. So I kind of do that on the page and then do one pass before I send it off for printing as well. Have some people proofread it too, go back and change those things. You can spend as much or as little time as you want with this. Obviously, we're going a little bit slower here as we talk, but I don't want the balloons to be in the way of the art. I try to cover up as little of the art as I can. I like this little Sears Tower he's done here, Willis Tower, whatever you call it. But I do want it close enough where you can see, I'm not an expert in any way. I've been lettering for about 10 years. I try to, like I mentioned, I follow Nate and some other amazing letterers, some amazing hand letterers. But I try to pick up tips as I go. So please, if you have tips that you want to share, drop them in the chat, drop them in the YouTube comments as well. And I'm always looking for different tips. Even again, starting out, I didn't realize how much I didn't know about lettering. You think it's just putting, the pixels on the page in this case, but there's so much more to the art form that I have still to learn that I'm really still enjoying learning a lot. If you are highlighted on something and you go to another, you can't use this cursor to move it, just so you know. So you would actually want to just click on empty space, and then you can kind of move this as you need to. Again, I have an older version of Photoshop, so you may even have some better shortcuts that you use. Again, I try to get that as centered as possible without being too OCD about it. Again, I'm not sure if I want to cover up that building. We're just going to leave it like that for now. We're going to save pretty often, so Control S is your best friend there. If that's one tip I can give you, don't get halfway through a page and then have it crash and then not be able to save. save your work. That is something that you learned far too often in this field, that saving is your best friend. Again, I'm going to do Control T. I go up to here just so I can use my wheel on my mouse to, but you can manipulate it. You know, you can stretch it and move it however you want with this. I find this a little bit easier. It's most helpful when you've when you're better at guessing, like I just did, where it was almost exactly centered. That helps. I have my little, preset tools here, pretty close to the page, so I sometimes leave them off to the side. I have a bad habit with that, and then you actually end up taking a lot more time. I think I got a small balloon down here. So again, I have kind of these pre-made ones, which help. But if you get a unique balloon, we'll go over that maybe another day, where you can use the shaping tool here, and then just manipulate your balloon however you want. I know people who letter in, I think it's Clip Studio now. Manga Studio used to be. I've tried that before. The learning curve was just a little too steep for me, and this is actually helping me to talk while I do this, make it a little less monotonous. So this might be something I do more often. This looks a little tight to me for an exclamation where I enlarge the words. You could, make that balloon, rougher around the edges if you wanted to really emphasize that. There's a lot of different things you can do in lettering where you make it part of the story, but without, again, I'm trying, again, Dan left me a really good space here where I can kind of letter it to where we're watching the book fall after we've, Dan's an amazing professional, so I don't know, I don't see on his pages that he often maps out the balloons, but you could do that in advance to kind of see, and we can see how this kind of, okay, you got Domenico is going to be talking here. She drops this book here, and then it leads to that. I might want to get it a little bit out of the way, but yeah, so you kind of get the idea how you can kind of guide the flow. I don't always take that into account when, you're in a hurry and you're trying to letter pages and get things done. You don't always take as much time as you would like, but, there's times like this where, again, it really worked well. And before we even, I'm probably going to keep this one brief today. I think we've been on about 20 minutes already. So just kind of, again, doing a test. So I'll go back and look at this, but let me show you. You're going to, again, it's Control-Shift-N for a new layer, but you can go up here and select a new layer as well. Again, I know some of the shortcuts. You can use the pen tool here. I always start with the point, so I'm trying to point, get it where it's kind of pointing as much at her as I can. I try as often as I can not to make the tails totally stiff like that. Like this one will definitely be curving. So we're going to put that here because, his mouth is over here. But then we're going to bend it like that. Again, we started with the point. We're going to end at the point. And if you hold while you're clicking with the pen tool, again, you can move this however you want. And it will, you get better with this. This gets quicker. Again, I know people who've used like Manga Studio where they have, where it's just a couple clicks and you kind of just make the uniform tails. Everybody uses different things. Most people use Illustrator, which is very similar to Photoshop. It's just a vector-based instead of pixel-based, which is more than likely long-term better. This one looks like it's kind of missing him a little bit, so I may end up, turning this. So we'll go over that. And then we got Lana here. We're just going to kind of curve. I'm not going to go super far across the art because she's the only one talking in this, but everybody does it a little different to try and communicate it. They may go like right up to here, so it's very clear who's talking. Yeah, there's a lot of things we can talk about, and hopefully we will. If we do more of these streams, we'll talk more about some of the theory behind which again, I'm still learning even after a decade. I take for granted a lot of the amazing information that's out there. Then you're going to right click when you're done with kind of your balloons. You can do them one at a time. I'm sorry, your tails. You're going to feather radius 0. Once you right click, you're going to make selection, feather radius 0. And then it's going to make the dancing ants, as they are called. And you're going to make sure it's on a new layer. If you don't do it on a new layer, you're going to mess up your balloons on here. So if you forgot to do another layer, this is a chance where you can make the layer and then these highlighted, oops, and you're just going to, because they were all highlighted, it'll put them all in at once. You're going to right click merge down, and that's going to merge them to the other balloons. So you can do that as many times as you need to. Now, I mentioned Control S is your friend. Control Alt Z is also your best friend. If you ever make a mistake, you're going to go back. But that's something to mention very early in this series is that if I go on, I can go back so many steps. I can't go back infinitely. It's only going to remember so many steps back or forward. You can go back, and then if you decide you liked it, you can edit step forward right here or step backwards. So Shift Control Z is to step back forward. But so if you make a mistake, if you didn't like something, now is the time really to change it. Because if I move on to these bottom word balloons, I might not be able to get back to where I was, or I might have made other changes in between. So now I'm having to redo those. So I'm going to kind of look at these real quick. Just for the sake of brevity here, I don't love this tail. It's kind of awkward looking. If I was in a super big hurry, I might not go back and change it. But sometimes I kind of take off some of the length of the tails there too. But yeah, so for today, I'm going to call the video at that. But again, you can see just some quick steps making the lettering. It took us 20 minutes here. Again, we were talking, so you can kind of see, if I wasn't paying attention to other things and looking at frame rates and checking the chat and things like that, things might have gone a lot quicker. I did also obviously copy the letters from a Word document or a Google Doc before this, so that takes some time too. But, to letter a page, with 5 or 6 panels with, 8 or 10 dialog boxes, it can take me 20 minutes if I'm really, cooking. It can take me an hour if there's a lot of, if I have to manipulate a lot of balloons or they're close to the edge and I have to, trim them off to make them look good. There can be a lot of different factors that come into it, but you kind of see in 15 or 20 minutes here, we were able to letter, about half of a page. Only had a few word balloons in this page, but we kind of went through some of the things I might change. Again, this tail, I think is okay, but I do sometimes get, and actually I'm going to just go ahead and change that while we wrap up here. I sometimes get, like this, where I'll start to really manipulate. Like I didn't like how large that one was, so I'm going to change that a little bit. This one is just a little bit, the angle is off, so I'm going to Control T, and then you see this little curved. Just going to turn it a little bit, just so it's that much clearer who's talking, so that it's not going past him to Jimmy talking down there. And I'm moving it down with the cursor now. So again, you kind of just see it's 2 slight little changes. Still not in love with this one. We may cut it off later. We'll go over how to kind of edit them if you do catch that at the end. And again, I did kind of just take these little. So you can see how OCD you can get about it. You can really start to zoom in and say, am I centered in the balloon? Am I not? It just depends on your style. Sometimes I feel like if I was a little bit sloppier to start with, that would be better for me. But especially with digital lettering, it is very clean looking. So, the font's very uniform. So you don't always have a lot of room to be sloppy like that. So even that, see, there was an extra space at the front, and I just happened to notice that. But yeah, good conversation today. Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully this video comes out okay so that it's able to last. Otherwise, I'll be repeating some of this in a future video. And I thank you all for tuning in. And hopefully you check out some of our books coming up. This is Drumsticks of Doom 2. Got a little bit of a sneak peek here. Take care, everybody.